everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at this book, The Gift of Fear, which really changes how we think about, well, fear.
Yeah, I mean, most people think of fear as, like a scary movie or being chased down a dark alley.
Right, exactly.
But in this book, Gavin de Becker shows us that fear, even those subtle feelings of uneasiness or doubt, can actually be a powerful tool to help us stay safe.
It's almost like a superpower we didn't even know we had. And to really understand this, we're not just talking about the book itself.
Right.
We're going to be diving into the audiobook, looking at some real-life cases, like really intense ones, and even exploring how our modern media age, the whole 24/7 news cycle and social media, how that impacts our sense of fear and security. It's a lot.
It is. It's a big topic.
It really is.
But I think it's one that we all can relate to.
Oh, absolutely, because I'm sure at some point, everyone listening has been in that situation where someone just won't take no for an answer.
Totally.
And de Becker, he calls this persistent pursuit. And he argues that our culture kind of romanticizes it.
It's true. You see it all the time in movies and TV shows where the guy keeps pursuing the girl even when she's clearly not interested. And eventually she gives in. It's supposed to be romantic.
Right, like he finally won her over.
Exactly. But in reality, that kind of relentless pursuit can be a huge red flag. De Becker emphasizes that no is a complete sentence. We should never feel bad about saying it.
I mean, it's so important to set those boundaries and be clear about what we're comfortable with.
Absolutely.
And de Becker, he actually gives us a script for flat-out rejection, something like,
oh, yeah, I remember that part.
I have no romantic interest in you whatsoever. I am certain I never will.
Oof, it sounds harsh, right?
It does sound a bit harsh when you say it out loud, but I can see why he's so direct.
Yeah, it's because clarity is key. Stalkers, they thrive on ambiguity. Yeah. Any little sign of hope, any maybe, can fuel their obsession.
So it's better to be upfront and completely shut it down.
Yeah. Leave no room for misinterpretation.
It's kind of like ripping off the Band-Aid.
It is. It's like, nope, this is not happening.
So speaking of stalking, do you remember Catherine's story from the book?
Oh, man. That one was chillin'. That guy, he did all that helpful stuff for her,
Right, like before they even really knew each other.
Exactly, like researching her life, showering her with all these unwanted favors.
Yeah, and remember, he even installed a car phone for her.
Without her consent.
Can you imagine?
That's just so creepy.
Super creepy, and de Becker calls that loan sharking.
Right, it's like when someone does you a favor that you didn't ask for, and then they use that to try and control you.
To make you feel obligated. So manipulative.
Exactly. And Catherine, she had those gut feelings from the start, but she ignored them.
Yeah, she kept making excuses for his behavior. And this is where de Becker's emphasis on intuition comes in. That feeling that something's off, that's our internal alarm system going off.
Our instincts are there for a reason, right?
Yeah, if something feels wrong, it probably is.
It's like, trust your gut. You don't need a logical explanation to feel uncomfortable or unsafe.
You really don't. Now let's switch gears a little bit to a case that really got me thinking. Have you ever heard of the Judas Priest case?
Yeah, vaguely. Remind me.
So it's about this young man, James Vance,
Okay.
and he blamed heavy metal music for his friend's suicide.
Wow.
And then, tragically, he took his own life too.
It's a sad story. It
Yeah.
sparked this whole debate about the media's influence, especially on young people.
Right, like, are we too quick to blame music or movies for violence? But when you dig deeper, like de Becker does in the book, the case gets a lot more complex. He argues that James was fascinated by violence long before he ever listened to Judas Priest. Like, he had these mercenary fantasies.
Oh, wow.
And even admitted that violent TV shows fueled his dark side.
It makes you wonder, how much responsibility does the media actually have in these situations?
Yeah. It's such a complicated question.
I mean, there's no easy answer, but
Yeah.
de Becker, he doesn't say that media has no impact. But he emphasizes that it's rarely the sole cause. There are often so many other factors at play, like mental health, substance abuse, access to firearms.
Yeah.
And especially whether young people feel isolated and unheard.
And that feeling of being ignored was actually a big part of James's case. He felt like no one was listening to him.
So in a way, this violent act was his desperate attempt to be heard, to get attention.
It's just heartbreaking, how desperation can manifest in such a destructive way.
It's a reminder that we need to pay attention to the warning signs and create environments where young people feel safe to speak up and get help. And that goes for schools too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because speaking of environments that should be safe, the case of 9-year-old Joey really shook me.
Oh gosh, what happened?
He committed a sexual assault at school.
That's terrible. Was he known to have problems?
Well, that's the crazy part.
Okay.
The school had his records. They knew he'd had some trouble in the past,
Oh wow.
but they didn't do anything. They completely ignored all the red flags.
They didn't inform the teachers or anything.
No. And to make matters worse, they actually transferred him to a class with younger, more vulnerable students.
It's like they set him up to fail. And worse.
It's like they just completely dropped the ball on protecting those kids.
This is a clear case of institutional negligence, and sadly, it's not that uncommon. Sometimes schools are just ill-equipped to deal with kids who have serious behavioral issues.
That's true. And this is where de Becker really emphasizes parental involvement.
Makes
Like,
sense.
he urges parents to ask tough questions about school safety policies and really hold them accountable for protecting our kids.
Yeah, be proactive. Don't just assume everything's okay.
Right. Because complacency, as we see in this case, can have really devastating consequences. And this is making me think about all the places where we just assume our kids are safe, you know?
I know, it's scary.
It really is. I think this deep dive is a big reminder to be more vigilant,
Yeah, I agree.
to pay attention to those little warning signs, those gut feelings.
Trust your instincts.
Yes. And speak up when something feels off. You never know whose life you might save, including your own.
Absolutely. It's
That-
about being empowered, not paralyzed by fear.
Exactly. Exactly. And speaking of empowerment,
Yeah.
let's move on to another topic that de Becker dives into: assassination in the media age.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It really is. But first, we need to take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
All right, so we're back and ready to dive into assassination in the media age. De Becker argues that the rise of these huge stars, like Frank Sinatra and Elizabeth Taylor, back in the day,
Right.
it really changed how we interact with, well, celebrities.
Like they became larger than life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it made them seem, I don't know, more accessible.
And vulnerable, maybe.
Yeah, like we knew everything about them. But of course, that's not really true.
Right. It's just this illusion of closeness.
Right. But that illusion, De Becker says, can be really dangerous, especially for people who have trouble separating fantasy from reality.
I've never thought about it that way, but it makes sense.
Yeah, and this warped sense of intimacy, it can lead to some really scary stuff. Like, remember the case of Ruth Steinhagen?
Oh, refresh my memory.
Okay, so she was this woman who, she was obsessed with this baseball player, Eddie Waitkus.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And she was so infatuated with him that when his team traded him, she felt like her world was ending. Like, she literally said she couldn't live without him.
Wow, that's intense.
Right. And so she actually ended up shooting him.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a really extreme example of how obsession can completely take over someone's life.
And it's so disturbing because they'd never even met. She just created this whole fantasy world in her head.
Exactly. It's like she felt this ownership over him, even though they were complete strangers.
It's like she thought she had a right to control his life, his decisions.
Yeah, and then the crazy thing is, after she shot him, she complained that no one came out of their hotel rooms.
What?
Yeah, like she was upset that they weren't paying attention to her.
It's like she wanted the attention, even though she just committed this horrible act.
Exactly. And that need for notoriety, for fame, is a common thread in a lot of these cases.
Like, they want to make a statement, leave their mark on the world, even if it's in a really twisted way.
Right. It's like, I may not be famous, but I'll be infamous.
Mm-hmm.
And De Becker compares Steinhagen to Valerie Solanas, who shot Andy Warhol back in the 60s.
Oh, wow, yeah. She wrote that radical feminist manifesto, right?
Yep, the SKU Manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
And both of these women, they felt this desperation to be recognized, to make a statement, even if it meant resorting to violence.
And it makes you wonder, how much does the media contribute to this?
Oh, that's a huge question.
Right. Like, does the intense coverage of these events actually encourage more of them to happen? Are we giving these attackers what they want attention?
It's a really disturbing thought, but De Becker makes a strong argument for it.
Give me an example.
Well, he interviewed Robert Bardo, the guy who murdered actress Rebecca Schaeffer.
Oh, yeah. That was such a tragic case.
It was. And Bardo, he was completely fixated on Schaeffer. He had this delusional belief that they were meant to be together.
It's like that sense of ownership we were talking about before, taken to the extreme.
Exactly. And when he saw her in a movie with another man, he felt betrayed, like she'd broken some unspoken promise.
So he decided to punish her for it.
Yeah. And what's even more disturbing is that he actually studied other assassins, like John Hinckley Jr., who shot President Reagan.
Wow, he did his research.
He did. He wanted to know everything about their motives, their methods, even their behavior leading up to the attack.
So it wasn't just a random act of passion. He was planning this, modeling himself after other assassins.
Yeah, and De Becker actually lists a bunch of actions Hinckley took before the Reagan shooting.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how many of them Bardo repeated.
Like what? Give me an example.
For one, they both wrote letters to their intended victims.
Oh, wow.
They both stalked other public figures before settling on their final target.
It's like they were practicing, working their way up to the big one.
Yeah, and they both kept detailed diaries, documenting their obsessions and their plans.
It's chilling, really.
And the creepiest part, they both brought the same book to the crime scene, Catcher in the Rye.
No way. Seriously.
Yep. De Becker calls these pre-incident indicators, and it's both fascinating and terrifying.
Fascinating because it suggests that there are patterns we can learn to recognize, but terrifying because, well, it means that we might be able to predict these events, at least to some extent.
That's a lot to take in, right?
It is. I mean, it's heavy stuff. So what does De Becker suggest we do with all this information? Does he have any advice for public figures, or are we just doomed to repeat these tragedies?
Well, he definitely doesn't leave us hanging.
Okay, good.
He stresses the importance of vigilance, especially when it comes to fan mail and unexpected encounters.
So be careful about what you open and who you interact with.
Exactly. And he also suggests that law enforcement should focus on the failures and inadequacies of these attackers.
Instead of making them sound like criminal masterminds.
Right. Don't glamorize them.
Yeah.
Show the world that this isn't a path to glory. It's a path to destruction.
Makes sense. Take away the allure of notoriety and maybe I'll deter others from seeking that same kind of twisted fame.
Exactly. It's about shifting the narrative, emphasizing the real consequences of violence. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot to process.
It really is. I feel like we've gone deep down this rabbit hole of fear and violence.
We have.
But let's bring it back to De Becker's main point. Remember, he's not saying we should be fearless.
Right. He's teaching us how to make fear work for us.
Yeah, like fear itself isn't the enemy.
It's a gift.
A gift. A survival signal that can actually help us if we learn to listen to it correctly. Think about it. Like, have you ever been walking down a dark street alone at night and felt that little twinge of fear?
Oh, yeah, totally.
That uncomfortable feeling probably made you more aware of your surroundings, maybe even changed your route.
It's like your body's way of saying, hey, pay attention. Something might not be right here.
Exactly. That's the gift De Becker's talking about. And he highlights these two key rules about fear. Do you remember what they are?
Oh, gosh, it's been a while. Refresh my memory.
Okay, so rule number 1. If you're feeling afraid of something, it means it's not actually happening in that moment. Fear is about anticipating potential threats, not reacting to present dangers.
Right. So if you're afraid of, say, being mugged while walking down that dark street, it means you're not actually being mugged right then and there. You're just anticipating a possible danger, which helps you stay alert.
Exactly. And then rule number 2,
Okay.
what we fear is often not the thing itself, but what we link that fear to those potential consequences that we imagine in our minds.
Oh, yeah, those can get pretty out of control.
They really can. Like, think about people who are terrified of public speaking. It's not really the act of standing up and talking that scares them.
It's the fear of being judged, of making a fool of themselves.
Exactly. Those imagined consequences they've linked to the experience.
And those can be way scarier than the actual event itself.
Exactly. And De Becker wants us to really explore those links, those stories we tell ourselves about what might happen.
To question those narratives, see if they're actually based in reality or just our own anxieties.
You know, this reminds me of the story he tells about Celia, who was terrified of being followed home from work.
Oh, yeah.
But she'd never actually had any real threats, you know?
So it was all in her head.
Well, not exactly. It turned out that her fear was more about feeling trapped in her job and her life in LA.
So the fear was real, but the source was something deeper, something she hadn't really acknowledged.
Yeah, the being followed scenario was just how those deeper anxieties were playing out.
It's a really good example of how fear can be a symptom of something else entirely.
Like a red flag signaling that something's out of balance in our lives.
Exactly. So instead of trying to ignore those fears or push them down,
De Becker wants us to listen to them, explore them.
and see them as opportunities for growth and self-discovery.
I love that. It's like fear can be a catalyst for change, a guide that helps us navigate life's challenges.
And ultimately leads us to a place of greater awareness and resilience.
Yeah, I really like that. So with all this in mind, how do we apply these ideas to our everyday lives? How do we harness the gift of fear and live more confidently in a world that, well, let's face it, can be pretty scary sometimes?
Well, I think the first step is just recognizing that fear is normal.
Uh-huh.
It's part of being human. It's not something we need to eliminate or be ashamed of.
We just need to learn how to use it to our advantage.
Exactly.
It's amazing how much we've unpacked about fear just from this one book.
Right. And what sticks out to me is how de Becker reframes fear. He's not telling us to be fearless, but how to actually make fear work for us.
Totally, yeah. Like, remember those two rules about fear? That just feeling afraid means it's not actually happening, and that what we
Mhm.
fear is often those exaggerated consequences we link to it, not the thing itself.
Oh, those mental gymnastics we do. It's so easy to spiral.
Right. But those rules help shift our perspective. Like, instead of what if, it becomes, okay, what's the real threat? What can I actually do about this?
It puts you back in control.
Exactly. We get our power back. And De Becker has all these examples, like Arlene, who was terrified of those office security cards.
The ones meant to keep everyone safe.
Yeah. But she focused on the card, not the potential danger it prevents.
Like being scared of a fire extinguisher because it reminds you of fire.
Yeah.
I'm missing the point.
Totally. And then there's Bill, who ignored that gut feeling when he heard a noise downstairs. Turned out to be an intruder with a gun. His family was held hostage.
Oh, gosh.
De Becker uses that to say, never dismiss those intuitive nudges. Our subconscious picks up on stuff our conscious mind misses.
We're not always good at listening to ourselves.
Right. Like that study he talks about shark being the word with the biggest psychological impact. Shark attacks are rare, but...
Something about them just terrifies people.
Exactly. De Becker thinks it's the randomness, that lack of warning, this primal fear of being devoured. But even with sharks, it's about separating the real threat from what our minds add on top of it.
All that extra fear we layer on.
So how do we live with this healthy sense of fear? The world feels unpredictable, right?
I think it starts with knowing fear is normal. It's meant to protect us. We don't got to get rid of it. Just learn to use it.
Listen to those gut feelings. Don't judge those fears and figure out what's a real threat versus, like we said, those made-up anxieties.
And be aware of how the media can mess with our perception of danger.
Oh, totally. They love to play up those scary stories. But we have more control than we think, right?
Exactly. De Becker reminds us we've all overcome fears before. Think about a time you did that. You probably had more control in that moment than you realized.
It's about shifting from what if to how shall we live. Love that.
That's the empowering part, isn't it?
Yeah, this deep dive has honestly made me feel more empowered, not less.
Understanding fear lets us move through the world with more confidence.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the gift of fear. We hope you got something out of it, and keep exploring these ideas.
Remember, listen to that intuition, question those scary stories you tell yourself, and embrace that gift of fear as your guide.
Until next time on the deep dive.